So I picked up these CS63DX Pioneer speakers a couple months ago. We're not going to listen to them in this video. We're just going to be addressing the tweeters that are in here. Neither of the horn tweeters that are in here, the PT-103F tweeters, worked. And so that sent me down this rabbit hole trying to figure out how to fix them or find replacements. And it turns out replacements only show up on eBay when people decide to part out their speakers, and they usually go for like 70 bucks each or something with shipping. I then stumbled across this forum post where somebody said that they had successfully fixed theirs by unwrapping the voice coil a little bit. This video is dedicated to showing you how to fix these tweeters, and we're going to compare the fixed diaphragm to the stock diaphragm and see if there's any difference in frequency response or sensitivity, that sort of stuff. And this is what you want to do to check your tweeter to see if it works, is you go ahead and put your leads on and you should get some resistance. If you get 0, then that means that your voice coil is burned out or one of the leads is broken. And on these tweeters, it's really common that the leads just literally melt because they are very small. There are 3 screws on the back and there's holes through it. And on this last screw, you just want to be really careful to pull straight up. Oh, yeah, so the problem was that the voice coil was actually stuck in the magnet. So one of the leads was fine, one of them melted. There's one lead on the left side here that is still, yeah, that ripped when I took this out because the voice coil, this was stuck in the magnet, but the other lead actually had already melted away and it was destroyed. And as much as that might sound like a bad thing that one of the leads melted away, that's actually basically what you want to see here, is that the leads melted, not the voice coil got destroyed. What we're going to attempt to do is uncoil some of the wire off this voice coil. I've never done this before, so we're learning together. We'll see if this actually works. I'm still not getting any resistance, so this voice coil might just be kaput, but we'll give it a try. So we're just peeling off a super small amount of wire, basically just enough to create a new lead, you know? And I'm gonna do this on both sides and then we'll test and see if we can get resistance. So my problem here is I think that this wire runs on the inside of the voice coil. Oh, no, it runs the other direction is all. I got something. Oh, there we go. I just got a little bit of resistance actually. So let's go ahead and see if I pull just a smidgen more, being incredibly careful. Right where we have these 2 wires, you can see I pulled up the casing here. Basically, there's a thicker piece of foam or cardboard or whatever on this side, and there's a little thinner white piece on this side, and in between is just the clear plastic of the diaphragm. And so I just very gently slid my knife in here and just lifted up the part where that wire went underneath. And we've still got this side over here where the wire goes underneath. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and do the same thing. You just want to be careful, obviously, working with a razor knife, but you can just lightly stick it in. And we shouldn't need to remove the whole gasket, but we just want to lift it up enough so that we can remove the wire that's under there already and then also thread our new strand of wire underneath it. Awesome. So let's see if we can pull this wire through now. I feel like it's going to be unlikely that we get it, but we can always try, right? It seems to go for quite a while. Ooh. I may have just broke it. Thankfully, I only broke off about 1/4 of an inch of wire that ran underneath the cardboard spacer. So I continued with my plan to lift the cardboard gasket and thread the wire into the gap. But it was a very tricky and suspenseful time wondering if it would work or not. This is one of the most nerve-wracking things I've done, dude. So I'm doing this voiceover just to speed things up and clarify them a bit. So the main 2 takeaways are lift the cardboard, then unwrap the additional wire and pull it under the cardboard. I could have gotten away with unwrapping less wire if I'd done things in this order. You only need just enough wire to get the leads to each solder point. All right, I'm gonna turn my fan on. So before I started soldering, I just set the diaphragm into its spot and then positioned the 2 leads so they were just above the solder pools that we were about to melt. I tried to use as little heat as possible to keep the wires from melting, so I was soldering at 650 Fahrenheit and I melted the pools of solder and then dipped the wire into them and then melted them again just briefly. And now for the big reveal. Oh, 9.6. We had no resistance before, now we have resistance. So theoretically, this should work. And actually, you can just use Scotch tape. This is not ideally a sticky note. I realized I don't have any sticky notes, but basically if you just flatten out some Scotch tape and you can stick it in the magnet gap, it works lovely for just cleaning out the magnet gap. basically just spin it around inside and it'll should pull out any nasties. You can see there's a little bit of dirt and stuff in there. So let's go ahead and try carefully putting this on. So obviously you really don't want to crush that voice coil.
I had applied too much pressure to certain parts of the voice coil, so it wasn't perfectly round anymore, which made installing the magnet very difficult. I used my fingers and tweezers to round out the voice coil, and after 6 minutes, I got the magnet back on.
All right, we got it. Woohoo! We're gonna need to line up all 3 of these screw holes and get our screws back in.
I installed 1 screw at a time, but didn't tighten them all the way since I needed to adjust the magnet to be centered so that I could get the lowest impedance. But it was still high at 8.4 ohms, so I tightened the screws down, but I was still wondering how this would affect the frequency response, so the next day I took it back to my workshop.
Alrighty, let's pull up a chair. So I'm here with the tweeter that I purchased from eBay. Do you have anything to say? Nothing? And the tweeter that I fixed, do you have anything to say? Nope, neither one of them has anything to say, but I have plenty to say. The one that I fixed is now measuring at 8.1 to 8.2 ohms resistance. The one that I got from eBay is about 7.2 ohms resistance. So we have an extra ohm of resistance on the one that was fixed, which is really interesting considering that there's technically going to be less wire in there. So I'm not really sure exactly why that is. Maybe my solder connections aren't that great or something. And I'm curious how that affects the frequency response and the efficiency. All right, so this is a super high-tech setup. I have an RTA, or real-time analyzer, the horn connected to my amp and directly, which is a little dangerous considering that this has a very low power handling and you would really not want to send full range sound through it. But then I have my laptop connected to the amp with a signal generator. They are on the same amplifier channel. The phone is the exact same distance away and that sort of stuff. So it's as technical as I can be, but like obviously this isn't a calibrated microphone, it's just my phone. But let's see what the frequency responses are because it's fun and we're kind of nerdy. If you're here, you're probably a little nerdy and that's great. We like audio and we like to fix things and we like to see if it, you know, that's why we're here. So without further ado, here's 3300 hertz. And just for fun, we're going to go all the way to 20,000, even though this is crossed over at 12,000, so it should be rolling off after this. My hearing goes up to around 17,000 from what I've measured, so over the next couple increments, I'm barely going to be able to hear them. I can no longer hear this. So if we plot all those frequency responses on a graph,
this is the frequency response graph for the new to me tweeter. The frequency response is decent for this tweeter, but as you can see, it's far from flat. However, with a crossover, you could make it much better between 3.3 to 12 kilohertz, as it's run in these speakers. This yellow line is the frequency response of the repaired driver. It's 1.3 to 6.5 decibels quieter across that same frequency range, with it being more quiet between 10 to 12 kilohertz. Interestingly enough, it's just a couple tenths of a decibel louder, around 16 to 17 kilohertz. Your mileage may vary, just because even working tweeters after this many years won't have the same frequency response.
So is it worth fixing this? I would absolutely say yes. You know, if you can notice the 2 to 6 decibel difference in your room that isn't perfectly acoustically treated, that has tons of reflections bouncing all over the place that are going to make a way bigger difference than that, then you can just use the attenuation knob on the back of the speaker to turn one tweeter up or turn the other tweeter down, and it's probably going to sound the exact same. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, this is the other tweeter out of those speakers that did not work and still doesn't work. I tried to fix it the same way, and it did not have melted voice coil leads. It's actually somewhere in the coil itself is damaged, so this one doesn't work. Now, what I did do and what you can look out for in the future are 2 things. I'm going to be replacing the crossovers on these speakers with new components to see what difference that makes, as well as trying a couple of different diaphragms in a separate video for these tweeters because they don't actually make replacements. So stay tuned for those videos. All that information will be in the pinned comment below, or it'll be recommended as a video at the end screen right about now. Thanks for watching.